Hello, my fourth grade friends. This is Mrs. Smith back with another lesson for you. Today's lesson is adding like fractions. It's chapter 9 in your math book, lesson 2. It begins on page 567 if you would like to follow along. Now, you might be wondering, what is a like fraction? How do I add like fractions? I want you to think of adding like fractions as joining parts that refer to the same whole, meaning that they have the same denominator. To add like fractions, all you have to do is add the numerators and keep the denominators the same. In this case, I have for you a set of fraction tiles. Now think to yourself, what part of a whole do these fraction tiles represent? Well, I have 1/5, 2/5, and 3/5. So these fifth parts here represent 3/5 of a whole. Okay? Now, if I take this piece here and place it, what part of the whole does this piece represent? This piece represents 1/5 of the whole. It's a unit fraction, just one part. So now if my job were to add these fractions, to combine them, it would be easy for me to do because they are like fractions, meaning that they have the same denominator. So I could take these two fractions here and line them up in an addition problem. 3/5 plus 1/5. And as I mentioned before, all you have to do to add like fractions is add the numerators and keep the same denominator. So my denominator is not going to change. It's still going to be fifths because all I'm doing is taking these parts and combining them. I'm adding them together. Okay? I apologize for the blurriness. It should clear up. Okay, so like I said, your denominator is going to remain the same. All you're going to do is add your numerators. So I had 3/5, 1, 2, 3, plus 1/5, just this one here. So 3 plus 1 is 4. So if I add 3/5 plus 1/5, I'm adding like fractions because they have the same denominator, and I get 4/5 as my sum. Okay? So moving forward, we're going to go ahead and look at your math book. Again, I am on this page, Add Like Fractions, Lesson 2. In your book, it is page 567 if you would like to follow along with these examples, and then you would have a great example page to refer back to as you move through the following lessons. So if I'm adding like fractions, I'm going to go ahead and look at this example down here, Math in My World, example 1. It says, Pablo spent 2/6 of an hour on a jigsaw puzzle. Conrad spent 1/6 of an hour on the puzzle. How much time did they spend working on the puzzle in all? Now I want you to think this is a word problem, so you should be using our cubes strategy. I'm going to write that acronym for you here. Remember, C stands for circle the numbers, U stands for underline the question, B stands for box the keywords, E stands for eliminate extra information, and S stands for solve. So the first step in cubes is to circle the numbers. So just skimming over this question, I know that I'm talking about 2/6 as one of my numbers and 1/6 as one of my numbers. So I circled both of those. The next thing is to underline the question. So I'm going to ask myself, where in this problem do I see a question? I know questions are indicated by a question mark. We often also will see a question-like word similar to how. So the question here is, how much time did they spend working on the puzzle in all? My question mark reminds me that this is the question. The next step is B, box the keywords. Now, you're going to want to look for keywords that indicate which operation we're doing. Am I doing addition? Am I doing subtraction? Am I doing division? Am I doing multiplication? So in this case, we can kind of predict what it's likely going to be because our lesson today is called Add Like Fractions. So let's skim over the word problem and see what kind of keywords I can find. So I see in all. Oftentimes, in all tells me that I'm going to be adding. So I'm going to put this little plus sign right here. Okay. Looking ahead, you can see that yes, we are in fact adding. So my keyword in all does tell me that I am adding today. Okay, the next one is E, eliminate extra information. I don't really care that his name is Pablo. Sorry, Pablo, gonna cross you out. Okay, I'm also gonna cross out this other information here of an hour on a jigsaw puzzle. Sorry, Conrad, just like Pablo, I don't really care about your name for the purposes of this math problem, so I'm gonna cross you out too, and also cross out of an hour on the puzzle. Okay, I never cross out the question and I never cross out the keywords. So now my job is to solve. So I'm finding 2/6, in all told me I was adding, plus 1/6 to figure out how much time they spent working on the puzzle in all. So here we are adding like fractions. Remember, they're like fractions because they already have the same denominator. So all I have to do is add the numerators and keep the same denominator. 2 plus 1 is 3. My denominator remains the same. So 2/6 plus 1/6 is 3/6. You can see it here. These first two orange tiles represent the 2/6 that Pablo spent. This 1 unit fraction, 1/6, that Conrad spent represents the 1/6 of time that he spent on the puzzle. If I push those fraction tiles together and combine them, 2 plus 1 is 3, keeping my denominator the same. Now I have 3/6. Now this is the next step that gets a little bit tricky. You just need to remember to do it, is that we need to write the sum in simplest form. 3/6 is not in simplest form. I know that 6 is a multiple of 3, so I can divide 3/6 by 3. Don't forget, what you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom, and vice versa. So both of these, the numerator and the denominator, I'm going to divide by 3. So dividing 3 by 3, I get 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So they spent 1/2 hour on the puzzle. And I like this visual here because it shows here are the 3/6 of the whole, the time that they spent on the puzzle. And you can see that the equivalent fraction bar that they've set right below it that matches up just perfectly is 1/2. So 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2. They're the same. Okay, so they spent 1/2 hour on the puzzle. Okay. Moving forward, if you'd like to flip the page, here we have example 2. Example 2 asks us to find 3/10 plus 5/10. Okay? To add those, all I have to do is add straight across on the numerators because the denominators are the same. They are like fractions. So 3 plus 5 is 8, keeping the denominators the same, 8/10. Now I need to simplify, put it in simplest form. I know that 2 is a factor of both 8 and 10, so I'm going to go ahead and divide 8 by 2, and I get 4, and 10 by 2, and I get 5. Okay, so 3/10 plus 5/10 is, yes, 8/10, but in simplest form, it is 4/5. Okay. Now, going back up here, I just want to remind you about when we put numbers in simplest form, the steps that we need to take. I was very quick to tell you that you were dividing by 2, but on your own, you need to remember how we put numbers in simplest form. So going back up here, let's pretend that these divide by 2s weren't here. I remind my class that you should rewrite the fraction like this, and then I want you to list the factors of both the numerator and the denominator. So in this case, my numerator is 8. To list all the factors, I tell you, start with 1. and see where you go from there. So to get 8, I need to multiply 1 times 8. So 1 and 8 are factors of 8. Then I ask myself, is there a 2 times that gets me to 8? Yes, 2 times 4 is 8. The only other number in between here would be 3, and I know nothing that I multiply by 3 will get me to 8. Okay, so the factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. Now doing the same thing for 10, I know that factors of 10 will always be 1 in itself, so I can start with 1 and 10. Then I think, is there a 2 times that will get me to 10? Yes, 2 times 5 is 10. And then the two numbers that would fit right here in the middle are 3 and 4. I cannot think of any numbers that multiply by 3 or by 4 that would get me to 10. So now I'm looking at both of these factors, and my job is to find the greatest common factor, or GCF. Okay, so looking here, common means the same. So they have 1s that are the same. They have 2s that are the same, but they both don't have a 4. They both don't have a 5. They both don't have a 10 or an 8. So I crossed those out here. And so the greatest common factor would be the biggest number that they both share. And in this case, it's 2, which is why I chose to divide by 2 up here. So moving forward on your job after this assignment, you're going to want to make sure that you're dividing by the greatest common factor. You know that a number is in simplest form when the only factors that your numerator and denominator share are 1. That looks like this. If I'm looking at 4/5 and I list the factors of 4, they are 1, 2, and 4. The factors of 5 are 1 and 5. The only factor that they have in common is 1. So I know that 4/5 is in simplest form. Okay? So here's a little picture to check your progress about when I added 3/10 and 5/10. I got to 8/10, and then lining up these fifth pieces here, this shows that my fractions are in fact equivalent. 8/10 is equivalent to 4/5. They represent the same part of this whole. Okay, so moving forward, your job now that you have watched this video lesson is to do the assignment that your teacher has assigned to you. Go ahead, and if you need to, you can pause this screen and take a look at what your teacher has assigned to you today. If you're in my class, Mrs. Smith's class, your job is to complete page 569, the independent practice front side of this lesson in your book. It looks like this. It's on page 569 in your math book, and your job is to complete this entire front page. Then, if you're in my class, after you complete the front page of that independent practice, you're going to open up your IXL packet and complete this page, page 7. It has a few questions on it about adding like fractions. If you're in Mr. Tillish's class, your job is to complete the My Homework page for this lesson, lesson 2 in your math book. The page numbers are 571 to 572. They look like this. So this front side as well as the back side. Okay? And then finally, if you're in Mrs. Schnett's class, your job is to complete the independent practice page 569 and 570. So this page that I've showed you already, independent practice, but Mrs. Schnett's class, you are in charge of this whole front side as well as the back side. So if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me, Mrs. Smith, or your own classroom teacher. Thanks, fourth graders. Good luck.